Uh, the side of the story that wasn't being told at that time is, obviously the impact that nutrition can have on the prevention of these diseases and the treatment of these diseases. And you'll notice, by the way, that that hasn't changed. In all of the conversation that you see these days about coronavirus and influenza, you never see the official conversation include nutrition.
Hey, what's up, y'all? Adventures in Brain Injury Podcast, special edition happening today because I have been interviewing somebody every single day since the 20th in light of COVID-19 because we're in a, a state of confusion, of uncertainty, and of loss of control. And those are ingredients for fear, which is disempowering for all of us, which is why I created an empowerment series where I'm interviewing somebody every day for their very qualified perspective. And this one is with probably the most qualified person to talk about viruses, about empowerment, and about the politics of a pandemic. And so this is my very first medical mentor. This is Dr. Alex Vasquez, doctor of osteopathic, naturopathic, and chiropractic medicine on the board of the Institute of Functional Medicine, written over 300 articles in well-respected peer-reviewed medical journals, and over 35 textbooks. So I'm just going to let y'all get right into it. This is me and Dr. Alex Vasquez. Dr. Alex Vasquez.
Right.
So such a pleasure to have you, man.
Likewise.
Yeah, we've been in each other's lives for a while. I discovered you. I mean, you were the first doctor that I started following after my injury, and and you have been sort of an unofficial mentor to me for a very long time, and I'm so appreciative of you and really excited to have you, on actually connect and interview finally.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate your invitation. I know that you and I have tried to contact each other, back and forth a couple of times over the years, but like we were just saying, I've moved around a lot and just stayed obviously very busy. So
yeah, right now you are in Spain, right? That's where you live.
yeah,
Yeah.
and I'm in protective custody right now.
Not a bad place to be. Who's holding you hostage?
Well, right now, the entire global control system, it would appear, because as you know, my opinion of this is that this is not simply a medical issue that's happening right now. It's obviously got some political components to it. So,
right.
But anyway, we may or may not talk more about that. But why don't we talk about like the history you were just asking me about, the book and all the stuff that happened this past week, for example.
Yeah. Well, all right. First of all, Dr. Vasquez is a doctor of osteopathic medicine, a doctor of naturopathic medicine, and a doctor of chiropractic medicine. He's written over 200 articles in peer-reviewed journals and written, 25 textbooks now? And
yeah, probably 35.
35 at this point.
Depends on how you do the math, but yeah, a lot.
So Dr. Vasquez is one of the most prolific humans I know, and extremely accomplished. And I wanted to get him on to talk about, the COVID-19 situation that we have going on right now, and get some perspective on what it's looking like from his very educated standpoint. So first of all, I want to ask you, what is a virus?
So viruses are just, they're obviously tiny little structures, right? They're smaller than cells, they're smaller than bacteria. And typically, like I think of viruses as having three components. You've got the genetic material, obviously. So viruses are basically just little capsules of genetic material. Uh, they don't really have the machinery that a mammalian cell would have. Like they don't have mitochondria, and they don't have a lot of mechanisms. They really just have their genetic material, and they have the ability, and maybe sometimes they have some enzymes kind of enclosed within them, but they're mostly genetic material, maybe with a few enzymes. So you got genetic material, you've got some type of capsule, often it's called a capsid, that surrounds the genetic material. And the third part that I think is important to understand about viruses is that they always have some type of structure on the outside, and that functions as kind of a key or a receptor or some way to attach to cells and then enter into them. So viruses can really only function once they've entered into another cell, whether it's a plant or a mammal or a cat or a dog or a human. So they have to enter in, and they can't just walk into any cell. They have to attach, and then some type of molecule has to fit onto the host cell, and then that's how the viruses enter. So it's kind of like the lock and key model or receptor model. So again, genetic material surrounded by a capsule or a capsid is the proper name, and then some type of structure on the outside that allows them to hook on to whatever cell they're trying to enter into. In the case of this coronavirus that we're dealing with in 2020, it has what's called a spike protein on the outside. And that's how these cells attach and then enter into human cells. The spike protein attaches onto a receptor. Probably more than one receptor can receive that spike protein, but the one that gets the most conversation is called ACE2. So that's basically how viruses function. And that's how they enter into cells, and then they hijack the internal machinery of the cell, because like I said, viruses don't have their own machinery. They have to use the machinery of whatever the host is. Mm-hmm. So they enter into the cell, and then they basically take over. It's kind of like a coup d'etat or a dictatorship of the cell. And then they say, if we're going to imagine a virus speaking, it announces to the cell, I'm taking over, and you're going to do my work for me, and you're going to reproduce me tens of thousands of times until you die. And then the cell usually explodes and releases all these virus particles. And that's how viruses are said to perpetuate themselves.
Gotcha. So it's basically a hijack situation of yourself, and then proliferation.
Kind of like you could think of it kind of like a carjacking, like, you've got your human cell doing its job, whatever that is, and then it gets hijacked or carjacked by this virus. And then the virus says, I'm taking over, and you're going to do what I want. So at least that's how it works for a while.
Okay.
And that's a pretty good analogy, and then your immune system is the police, and your immune system has to come and, kill the hijacked, basically blow up the hijacked car. That usually kills the human cell as well, but that doesn't matter too much unless it's like a brain cell. Then that obviously does matter. Right. But most of the other cells can regenerate themselves.
Okay. So you wrote a book called AntiViral Nutrition.
Right.
Tell me how that came to be.
Well, obviously I didn't just like wake up one day and write that book. I had studied, I'll try to give you the short story, but I'll try to make it complete. When I was in chiropractic college, starting back in the early 90s, we had a basic microbiology, followed by clinical microbiology, followed by public health, and then pathology. So I was somewhat fortunate for my first year and a half of chiropractic college that we had a lot of study in microbiology. And, a lot of students just ignored it because they said, well, all I'm going to do is, do musculoskeletal care. But I always studied everything to the maximum that I could, So like when I was a chiropractic student studying microbiology, I studied as much as I could. I wanted to understand the stuff. So, my experience was obviously different from probably the experience of most of my classmates. After I graduated chiropractic college, I went straight into naturopathic medical school. And there, I took clinical microbiology, and we had a great teacher for clinical microbiology. And then we had another class in immunology. Uh, and then, so I got another dose of microbiology and immunology, which was really good because, naturopaths are really focused in on treating infectious diseases and immune disorders. So our study in naturopathic college of microbiology and laboratory medicine and immunology was quite detailed. So then I practiced for 6 years, 7 years, then I went to osteopathic medical school and then got everything, once again. So, obviously I had studied, microbiology at this point several times, and I had studied it quite a bit on my own. In 2009, I published a book called Chiropractic and Naturopathic Mastery of Common Clinical Disorders. And in that book, I talked about treating viral infections for the first time in my work, which had previously focused on orthopedics and rheumatology. So in that book, I started to organize kind of a treatment strategy for virus infections. That was, again, in 2009. I didn't touch that work again until 2014, which is when the Ebola crisis was going crazy all over the place. So at that time, and with Ebola and acute flaccid paralysis and measles and all the news about all these viral infections, I felt a need to kind of address those concerns by telling the other side of the story, which was never being told at that time. The side of the story that wasn't being told at that time is, obviously the impact that nutrition can have on the prevention of these diseases and the treatment of these diseases. And you'll notice, by the way, that hasn't changed. In all of the conversation that you see these days about coronavirus and influenza, you never see the official conversation include nutrition, right? Like no one's saying on the news, oh, well, make sure you take your multivitamin supplement. Even if it's a low dose supplement, they should still recommend something. And they're not doing that at all. And for me, that's a big reveal. The fact that you're supposed to do everything to take care of yourself and to take care of your neighbors and your community, and you're supposed to shoulder a responsibility for this. but not to the point where you would actually take a nutritional supplement, right? That's completely out of the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And that's ridiculous. That's ridiculous, and it's irresponsible. But it also tells you who's guiding the conversation.
Well, before we go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna make something up real quick. So let's say I'll just go with the metaphor that I've got right now. Let's say that you're obviously this isn't you. So let's say a person is trapped in a car that's on fire, right? Let's say like the doors are jammed or something, and the person's in a car and the car is on fire. And the official advice for you is to stay in your car, and wait for the official fire department to come rescue you, right? You would immediately see that as stupid. And you would say, well, yeah, my door might be jammed, but I could climb out the window. I don't have to sit around here and wait for your help, I mean, that's a reasonable metaphor, even though I just made it up right now. So why aren't people being educated about how they could empower themselves and roll down their window and climb out of the problem, right? I mean, that would be a reasonable thing if this were legitimate, in my opinion. And I'm not saying it's not legitimate, but certain aspects of this don't add up, So why aren't people being advised about how to treat themselves? So anyway, that's going on now, and it was going on back in 2014. And so I knew I had all this information on viral infections and nutrition. So I said, people need to know about this stuff. Mm-hmm. So that's when I was writing a couple of books at that time anyway. So that's when I refreshed all that information and put it in the book as a separate little book, AntiViral Nutrition. So, and I included that in some other larger books, because usually I just write big books, not small books. But in this case, I broke out and wrote a small book. AntiViral Nutrition. Well, so that was 2014. I think it was October 22nd when I published that book. And I just got a message this week on Tuesday midnight from Amazon saying that they were pulling the book off the market. And I was like, what are you talking about? The book's been for sale for 6 years. It's got 5-star ratings. It's a #1 bestseller in its category. And why is it getting pulled off the market right now? I mean, nothing's changed. And the other thing about that book in particular, I would say it has two, let's just say it has three important characteristics, AntiViral Nutrition. One is it's totally based on research. I mean, that's all I do throughout the entire book. Well, I have a few of my own models and conversations, but the therapeutic components are all reference to research. You know, it's not like I'm telling people to drink some magic tea and, you know, their herpes will go away or something like that. Because herpes viruses are always there. They never disappear. So that's why it's a good example. But my point is, I was very scientifically responsible in the book. I mean, it's all citations. It's more than 270 citations. So that's one characteristic of it. The other characteristic is that I wasn't like anti-vaccine. I don't even know if anti-vax was a concern back then, but I guess it was. Otherwise, I wouldn't have addressed it. So I specifically stated in the book, I didn't even talk about vaccines, but I specifically stated in the book, I said, none of this is anti-vaccine. At that time, I didn't care about vaccines, and I still don't care about them. So it was scientifically solid. It wasn't anti-medicine or anything like that. I mean, anybody who really knows me knows I love medicine. Like some of the best experiences I had in my training were like I loved urgent care and emergency medicine. I mean, that's what I probably should have done. So it was science. It wasn't anti-medicine. And I had a third component I was going to say, and it may segue to the first one that I said, and that is the book was responsible. You know, I wasn't promising anybody a cure. The book talks about all of the common virus infections, and obviously I'm not going to write one book with one protocol and say, yeah, this book and this protocol cures everything. I'm not going to do that. Somebody else might do that, but that would be irresponsible. So I was scientifically responsible, I was ethically responsible, and I wasn't anti anything. And so they pulled the book this week. I wrote them back and I said, what's the problem here? You know, this book has been for sale for 6 years. It's got 5-star ratings. I'm a credentialed professional. It's not like I'm making this stuff up. 270 citations. And they said, we've made our decision and we decide what we publish and what we don't, and what we sell and what we don't, and we're not going to sell your book anymore.
Wow.
And I thought that was ridiculous because I'm sure I could go to their store right now and find articles on, you know, not simply articles, but like supportive information on how to be a sociopath. You know, like they've got books there on like hate crimes, not simply describing them, but advocating them. They've got books there. They sell books that advocate, you know, hate and racism and pedophilia and all this stuff, but they won't sell a book on nutrition for treating viral infections.
Right.
I mean, come on.
So
that was the situation this week. Like I said, I got that message at midnight on Tuesday, and then Wednesday and Thursday, I took the same files, the same digital files, and I turned it into an ebook to sell online.
Good. I want to detour a minute, and then I want to come back to the political and you know, financial things and why that might have been pulled and things of that sort. But I wanna ask you some more about viruses. And
Sure.
we talked about what a virus is, and what about a coronavirus?
Yeah. So the basic structure of viruses is the same throughout. I guess we could probably find some exceptions, but generally you've got genetic material surrounded by a capsid, and then you've got some type of external structure which interfaces with the environment, right? So like with coronavirus, they call it the spike protein on the outside, you know, which that probably is a bit of a reveal as well, in my opinion. So if you actually look at the structure, and I'm sure you've seen pictures of them, of the coronavirus, and they show these uh, kind of extensions. In my opinion, it's not really a spike. It's more like a club or a clover, or because it's got kind of a round tip to it. Spikes don't have round tips to them. Usually they're sharp, right? So I think that it's an inappropriate. I think the name is wrong to call it a spike. They could have called it a club or a clover or a key. Calling it a key would help people understand it more so than a spike. So, what do you think? When you think of a spike, what do you think of? It sounds kind of dangerous, right? It's like,
Aggressive. Yeah.
whoa, that's
Dangerous.
kind of scary. So I think even the way that the structure has been described is kind of has a tone to it. I mean, it's like you're supposed to be scared of this thing. Coronaviruses, back to your question. So coronaviruses are a family, like
Right.
you've got the Smiths and the Davises and the Joneses, and you've got the coronaviruses. So they are a family of viruses. They commonly infect humans. So like when people get a cold, 15 to 30% of so-called upper respiratory tract infection or a cold, that's 15 to 30% of those are coronavirus. So most people have already had coronavirus infections. But in this case, this happens to be a coronavirus that has mutated, and we can reasonably state it appears to be more aggressive.
So is that what the 19 signifies?
No, that I think the 19 just signifies the year, but it's because it mutated, in 2019 theoretically, and that's when it became an issue. So it's just kind of an indicator.
Gotcha. And so is SARS a coronavirus?
Right. So the first SARS coronavirus, I believe, was identified in 2003, or sorry, it could have been 2013, but I think it was 2003. Yeah. That was the first what's it? SARS, severe acute respiratory. Yeah, severe acute respiratory coronavirus. That was the first one back in 2003, and now we've got SARS-2. So coronaviruses, again, they're common, lots of different types. Sometimes they infect humans, sometimes they infect animals, sometimes they infect animals and then humans. Sometimes they only infect animals. Like there's a couple of pig coronaviruses that only infect, obviously, pigs. So anyway, that's the situation. So a big family of viruses, a couple of bad actors. Some of them are kind of wimpy, and they cause a respiratory infection that lasts a couple of days, no big deal. Sometimes they mutate, or let's just say, if we're going to extend the metaphor, let's just say they get a bad attitude or they get drunk or whatever. And they want to beat people up, and that's what's going on right now. So we have a more aggressive coronavirus right now, apparently, than what we've had before.
Okay, and it's more contagious than before, is my understanding.
Well, yeah, we could say that.
Okay,
but obviously, I don't want to say that. So let's say that that's true.
Okay.
So contagious here. So I'm going to break this down for you. So what does contagious mean? That's what they say, but what does it mean? So the contagious implies, I'm just making this up right now, I've never said this before, but contagious implies a relationship, right? A virus can only be contagious if the host is susceptible. So if here again, Kevin, if we say the virus is more contagious, we're putting all the blame on the virus, and we're giving the virus all the power, right? So for example, like if I like a certain type of music, and for me that music's really contagious, you know what I mean? Like it like totally wakes me up, I totally groove to it, whatever. You could be immune to that. You could say, man, I'm not digging that, right? You know what I mean? Like it's a relationship. Like the virus can't be contagious if the host isn't vulnerable.
Mm, that's odd.
So if we're going to talk about, I mean, if we're really going to think, and if we're really going to use language appropriately, we can't just say the virus is more contagious, period. You have to say the virus is more contagious among a vulnerable population, you know? Now, if 100% of people are vulnerable to that infection or that acquisition of the virus, then you could say, well, yeah, it's a characteristic of the virus. Human defense has no place in this. There's nothing we can do, and we're just going to die, you know? But that's obviously not the situation. So, you know, is it more contagious? Yeah, it probably is. Maybe it is, you know, but are some people relatively immune to it? Yeah, obviously. Do some people get it and they don't even know they have it? Obviously. In fact, the majority of people have really mild symptoms or nothing. So, do you care about a virus that's very contagious if it doesn't hurt you? You know how many viruses you have in your body right now? Like in the hundreds.
Mm-hmm.
Do you care about them? Maybe. I mean, I'm not asking you details or anything, but you know, nobody cares unless they're vulnerable to it. You know, so a new paper was just published this week saying that people have at least 200. Maybe they said 200,000, but it was like a huge quantity of viruses. Does anybody care about that? No, because we're obviously living and we're okay with that.
Right.
So, you know, again, is this virus more contagious? Maybe it is. Do host factors play a huge role in whether that makes any difference whatsoever? Yeah, obviously it makes a huge difference. You know?
So
So, you know, everything has to be contextualized.
right. So what is a big concern is that if we're not susceptible to it,
Mm-hmm.
we can still be a host to it, and can we pass it on to people who are more susceptible to it?
Yeah, I think that's probably true here. That's true of most viruses.
And
So,
that's
yes,
my
that's
biggest concern with it, is passing it on to others.
right.
Um, and so yeah, I'm all about keeping it like at bay, and at the same time, what are there are some extremely drastic measures being taken to do so that have
Mm-hmm.
huge huge implications um, happening worldwide. Do you think
Right.
that's an appropriate response at the moment?
Well, I'll give you my opinion. We'll have to link to that article. So I just sent you an article this morning, or
Mhm.
I don't know, maybe you sent it to me, but I think maybe I sent it back to you. So an article was just published by a guy whose name I have a hard time pronouncing. Sorry, but he works at Stanford, and he said basically we have no idea what we're doing. He said we don't have real numbers, we don't have good testing, we haven't tested enough of each given population to know how common is this. You know, we don't have the numbers basically, and if we don't have the numbers, then we have no idea what we're doing. I mean, we can guess and we can be scared and we can all hide in the closet. But the fact is, we don't have the numbers. Maybe 80% of the people have this virus, and only a small fraction of those people actually get sick, and even a smaller fraction die. If that were the case, then do we all need to be on quarantine for that reason? I would say probably not. What we should be doing, and what the naturopathic profession has always done, is look at, you know, host vulnerability and host factors. You know, why, instead of saying some people get it and some people don't, ask the next question, which is why do some people get it and some people don't, right? Not simply age. I mean, they've gone on age. Why do they talk about age so much? Why do they say kids are immune and old people get it? What's the advantage to that narrative? The advantage is you can't do anything about it. So let's assume it's correct, and I believe it is correct. I mean, we've got enough data to support that. But look at how the data is very selectively administered, right? The data given to people is the data that doesn't empower them. Oh, well, young kids are immune from it and older people are vulnerable. That doesn't help me. I can't do anything about that.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I could look, or somebody could look, at factors that we see in kids that we don't see in older people. What happens, as people change, as people get older, their hormones change, their melatonin levels go down. Kids have a lot more melatonin than older people. As people get older, they have other problems. Sometimes their immune system just worn down from a life of, inflammatory foods and infections and nutritional deficiencies. Well, we could change those things, right? Instead of just saying, well, people are more vulnerable because they're older. What is age other than years? I mean, obviously it's years, but what goes along with those years? More drugs, more diseases, more nutritional deficiencies quite often, institutionalized food, things like that, right? So, you can decipher the language here and break it down and kind of see what they're telling you and what they're not. And I think that if we were to identify those host vulnerability factors, we could get some insights into how to manage this,
And this is what you've done a lot of in your antiviral nutrition book.
Right, totally. So, of course, we're all watching this and we're all, trying to follow whatever the new developments are. But some things aren't going to change, like just because we have this virus now for 4 months doesn't mean we have to rewrite all of medical history and all of nutritional science and everything else. It doesn't rewrite physiology forever. Some things we already know, and those things we can use, how to stimulate host defense, how to strengthen barriers, how to reduce viral replication, how to address the consequences of inflammatory challenges. I was writing it this morning. I was actually writing it. So as I just mentioned a minute ago, I had to reformat and kind of redistribute antiviral nutrition this week after it got pulled for no reason. So that cost me 2 days of work, basically. So today's my first day to actually get back to actual science and writing and things like that. And I am working on what's going to be another publication specific to coronavirus. So it'll probably be called something really creative like coronavirus antiviral nutrition or something like that. And I'll try to publish it as a book like I always have done, but I'll have to publish it as a PDF that people just download, in case I get blocked again.
Right.
The other thing, obviously, that's much faster. If I publish it myself, I can control the price and I can make it available in 2 hours or 1 hour once I get it finished. Whereas if I go through a publisher and editing and proofreading and page setting and formatting and designing the cover, are you kidding? That's going to cost me 3 months, and by then, I mean, that's a delay that's actually bordering on irresponsibility. So anyway, I am working on this information, and yes, I'm obviously looking at everything new because anytime I address a topic, I don't just recycle my own ideas. We have to look at it from scratch. And I am doing that now with coronavirus. But while I'm doing that with coronavirus, I'm also seeing that a lot of things are going to stay the same. Selenium, vitamin A, vitamin D, NAC. Licorice has already been documented to have some effectiveness against SARS from 2003. Does that mean it's going to be effective in inhibiting replication and entry of the SARS-2 virus? It doesn't mean that, no. That data is now 17 years old or something like that. So, we can't say that data that applies to SARS-1 applies to SARS-2. But does it most likely apply? Yeah, it most likely applies,
So,
So,
you're saying SARS-1 and SARS-2. This is SARS-2. This is another SARS. So yeah,
right, it's just a mutated version of the same previous one. I think they're 82% identical.
Okay.
So, and I did see that number. I hope I'm quoting it correctly, but
Yeah,
they're 82%. 82%
that's pretty close to
identical.
what Dr. Silverman said as well.
Yeah. Well, the other thing is, Viruses as a group have enough, you know, enough similarity that if we can target one, usually we can target its relative with some degree of effectiveness as well. But the other thing is, and this is an important point, the antiviral nutritional strategy really doesn't depend on the vulnerability of the virus. The whole idea of using a host targeted program is that it targets the defenses and the machinery of the host. The drug model, and I say this in the book, and I said it in one of my recent presentations. The drug model, and this is an important point, the drug model is to target the virus. So, they're going to target the spike protein, they're going to target the enzymes inside the virus. Why do they do that? That's the drug model. They want to sell a different drug for every virus that's out there. They want to sell a different vaccine for every virus that's out there. If they were to, if we collectively were to simply strengthen host defense against a lot of these infections, we could probably alleviate or avoid most of them, or certainly mitigate them. And then not be so dependent on antiviral drugs necessarily. And like I said, I'm not anti-medicine. I'm not anti-drug. I love drugs. That's why I loved working in the ER when I did, because somebody comes in with a problem, that's the perfect time to rescue them with drugs. You can keep people's blood pressure up. You can, reduce their inflammation, give them huge doses of steroids. Sometimes that's what people need in emergencies. That's one of the beautiful things about emergency medicine.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying that we would never use, these antiviral drugs, but we could help them work better if we use nutrition along with them, because then we'd be supporting the host while we're attacking the virus. Perfect. Right now, all they want to do is talk about the virus and leave the host weak. Well, I don't think that's a good strategy. Like anybody could get killed by a chihuahua if they're weak. But if you're strong and you've got good defenses, then that chihuahua becomes irrelevant.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That was a good metaphor. I'm rocking.
You're full of them, man.
I'm rocking the metaphor.
Been. So what your nutritional antiviral nutrition is about building up the host defense. It's about taking care of you, your immunity, and your resilience to a infection, a virus, things of that sort. And I just wanted to say that Dr. Vasquez has made this available on his own page, and I think you have really inexpensive right now, right?
Yeah, it's like $3.
Like $3, yeah, and I'll post that in the comments.
Yeah. Thanks. Yeah, at some point, I mean, $3 is pretty cheap. It should be more like $12 or $15 at least. But that's what it is right now. So I'll keep it that way until April, probably.
All right. So part 2, we're going to talk about that, the politics of a pandemic. And we're going to talk about why Dr. Vasquez's book was pulled by Amazon without explanation in the height of arguably the most influential viral pandemic of our lifetime. Not even arguably, definitely the most influential. So we're going to talk about that, and stay tuned for that. Check it out. And if you're enjoying this, leave us a review at feedthebrain.com/iTunes. All right, I'll leave it with that. Adios, y'all.
Someone take me to a doctor.